Frederick Engels and Lenin, because this is the only theory. Marxism is the only theory which opens so many doors and windows. How to interpret a text from different points of view. Again, after Marxism, actually we are getting your structuralism and post-structuralism, particularly deconstruction. They are also helping us in a number of ways how to uh, analyze a text, applying the linguistic theory, applying the sociological theories. So many, again, these cultural studies or new historicism or psychoanalysis or post-colonial theory. So all these theories, actually, they are helping us to interpret the characters in the text, to interpret a poem, to interpret a story, or whatever piece of literature. Even even some of the non-literary texts can also be analyzed from that from those point of view. So we'll be discussing first cultural studies, the cultural studies and interdisciplinary approach. Uh, Cultural study as an interdisciplinary approach means where all the branches of knowledge, the knowledge of anthropology, the knowledge of psychology, the knowledge of history, politics, economics, even science. So all these they are helping to develop this theory. Culture, as I have already mentioned in my earlier class, culture actually it creates a structure, and the structure is responsible for creating the center, and again center is responsible for creating what, the other. The otherness actually, which as I have already discussed, this idea is given by Simone de Beauvoir, the feminist, the feminist. If you are not at the center, um, you are at the periphery, or you are the other. So uh, at center, actually, who are who constitute the center? The power. Those people who are in power, who are the authority, who are the previously in the past they were the kings. Nowadays, the politicians, uh, the bureaucrats, or the rich, the capitalists, they constitute the power, and who are not at the power at the center, who are not having power, they are not at the center, and they are the other, they are somewhere outside the center. And because of this exclusion, because of the social or economic or political exclusion, actually we find all these theories, it is helpful, that which have not been focused earlier. Nowadays, in the modern and postmodern times, in our contemporary theories, actually they are becoming very important. And we cannot discuss a text, we cannot interpret a text leaving this otherness. So we'll be discussing in that, from that point of view. Cultural studies, actually it is helping that this structure, which culture creates structure, and the structure creates um, author, and author creates uh, text, and text gives meaning. And when we get the text at the hand of the reader, how can we exclude, how can we forget, how can we overlook this otherness? Okay, so that is the issue. uh, Actually in the 60s and 70s, uh, this cultural studies, uh, it became an instrument, it became an intellectual um, discourse to interpret literature. So as I have already mentioned, literature means language. It is produced through language, and language is a product of culture, right? So literature is culture. Culture means literature. Literature means culture. So we cannot forget this cultural structure while interpreting literature. Therefore, there is a need of cultural study to understand a text in a better way. So man who becomes author, he is a product of a culture, and we cannot deny the influence of culture when somebody writes or creates a piece of literature or any work of art. Whatever he writes, he also actually whatever he writes, he reflects this cultural essence, and that is why culture actually, particularly culture with capital C, which was given importance in the past, okay, in the medieval period, or in the even in your neoclassical period. Actually, this cultural with capital C, again, this capital C means it's the center, which was given nowadays. It is becoming a popular culture, folk culture. Okay, so this popular culture or folk culture, there is who are there? There is the mass. Mass means they are the other. So we cannot uh, avoid them. We cannot exclude them when we discuss a piece of literature. Since it is a interdisciplinary, it is intertextuality. Very often, cultural studies or whatever cultural studies and new historicism, they are almost parallel. Again, when I will be discussing this, some of these points. I will be repeating, and all these new theories, they are in a way they are intertextuality in nature. Intertextuality, actually, I have already discussed this point in my previous class. Intertextualism means in a text there is the echo of other texts. So, like human beings in our society, as human beings, they interact, they exchange ideas, they make friendship. In the same way, texts, they also interact with each other, and in one text we find the trace of other text. It is a parallel approach, right? Um, it is a parallel approach with British cultural materialism, the new historicism. These are again theories. British cultural materialism, the new historicism, the America's multiculturalism. Okay, and particularly at this point of um, globalization, in the process of globalization, when the whole world has been a global culture, it has the whole world has been one, and there is a global culture. Uh, that means all the authors, they are interconnected. So when they write the text, the texts are also interconnected, and this is because of this multicultural aspect of uh, literature. It is also close to post modern and post colonialism. In many ways, I will also be focusing this postmodernism. In many ways, this is very close to postmodern approach or postmodernism and post-colonialism. It is not everything for a classical text like Shakespeare's Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear, where human emotion. Again, this is a comment. I have derived this comment from um, Bikeda's 20th century literary criticism. Um, um, he's an Odia and an eminent professor. Recently, he has retired, and fortunately, he was my teacher, and he has written a book I have with me. That book is 20th century literary criticism, and I have borrowed this idea. He is commenting on cultural studies and other post-colonial theories, saying that it is though there are many theories have evolved with the explosion of knowledge, with the opening of new branches of knowledge, but it is not everything. Also, in my last class, while concluding that class, I told that it is not everything, because as Peter Berry says in his beginning theory, Peter Berry says, what does he say while giving 10 tenets of liberal criticism, liberal humanism? He says that the first point, he says that good literature is timeless. Means it is beyond all these theories, it is beyond all your perspectives, all that critical mirrors that you hold to interpret literature. Whatever theory you may apply, maybe Marxism, maybe feminism, or whatever ism you may apply, good literature is timeless. It goes beyond time, beyond age. Why? It also goes beyond culture and community. Why? Because some of the emotions, human emotions, they are universal in nature. They are very basic in human psyche. So, for example, sorrow, suffering, all these emotional um, outbursts that takes place. Uh, Love for, for example, parental love for the children. Okay, and this man or man woman relationship. Some of these basic relationships, sense of sacrifice, sense of love, affection, and whatever, and concern for each other. That is timeless. Uh, that is something which cannot be confined in any particular theory. That is why literature is timeless. So you cannot confine the meaning by applying only one or any particular theory. So with respect to this um, mm, this approach, again, I'm coming to uh, uh, postmodern theories, and let us discuss some of the important uh, issues what postmodern writers uh, they say about it. Postmodern theory is a theory uh, which look at literature from different uh, perspectives. Uh, Postmodernism is a literary theory that involves all fields of knowledge. Again, the same thing. Power shift after Second World War. Already the world has witnessed two world wars, World War One, World War Two, and after these two great wars, there has been a shift of power, role of media, and media creates the world view. We have already discussed in Marxism while discussing that how state creates media and how state controls the whole media, and through media how the state, the authority, how they control um, the citizens, the society. So that is how in a postmodern society, in a postmodern world, because of this impact of media and the men of letters, the authors, actually they are not free, and whenever they write anything, they reflect. They sometimes admire the statesman, the political party, okay, or a particular king or a particular authority, and also very often authors they give importance to the mainstream culture, the mainstream ideology, and this is because of the state apparatus which Louis Althusser he has pointed out while we were discussing that. Um, so it's a kind of if we interpret that text from that point of view, we are missing something. It is becoming a kind of misreading, which Derrida says in a deconstructionist Derrida. He says that the meaning is postponed because we find some gaps. We find the absence of meaning because the author deliberately he postpones. He doesn't reflect what is the truth, and accordingly something is hidden in literature, and that hidden layer is opened by Derrida. So postmodernism is an approach where actually we see how the author actually he is influenced by the the power, the power structure, and how he reflects only that ideology which is the ideology of the state. So we find some clear cut differences between modernism and postmodernism. Modernism actually from 1900 to 1945 till the Second World War. It was the period of modernism, and postmodernism starts from from the Second World War until postmodernism is continuing. You can say postmodernism, but that is also an extension of postmodernism or modernism. Postmodernism is an extension of modernism in that point, right? So not altogether it is different. It takes some view, some theories, and accordingly it modifies some of the theories uh, to discuss or to have a literary and social discourse in literary studies. It rejects the view of a high-low art form. There was a concept of high culture, low culture, as I have discussed, with cultural C. Again, also high literature, low literature. Okay, high form of art and low form of art. Actually, this concept has been rejected in the postmodern uh, theory. There is another important concept as far as postmodern theory is concerned. That is something known as pastiche, P-A-T-I-C-H-E. Pastiche means actually taking various ideas and pasting them together, making a new style. As far as postmodernism is concerned, it is a kind of copy. Any literature, any literary text that is created, as I have already discussed, because of this intertextuality, it is a kind of copy. There is nothing new in literature, right? In that way, in postmodern theory, you can say every writing is a rewriting. What Derrida says, every writing is a miswriting. Every reading is also a misreading. But here, in postmodern idea, in postmodern ideology, in postmodern theory, every writing is a rewriting because many authors in the past, maybe modern or romantic or neoclassical, every author, many authors, they have already written such kind of characters, such kind of plots, such kind of stories. So, in the postmodern era, the authors, they try to mingle all sorts of um, ideas that they have already read, and accordingly they create a kind of a mixture, um, and that is a kind of pastiche, which is a new concept as far as uh, postmodern theory is concerned. And here actually they create a world that is um, beyond redemption. As far as modernism was concerned, there is of course a fragmented world as we find in Eliot's Wasteland, in his Four Quartets, and in other, in James Joyce's Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. These are actually the text. This text reflects the spirit of modernism, where actually they have created a hope that, in spite of the fact that there is a fragmented world, there is a fragmented man, still there is a hope that a unity can be created, hope can be created, and hope can give a new ray of life. But here in postmodern society, where absurdism is taking the role, many characters, they appear very absurd, and it seems there is no goal, uh, there is no uh, objective, and as if the characters, as we find in postmodern texts, they are beyond redemption, and there is always a sense of hopelessness. So this is, um, as we find in Beckett's Waiting for Godot, Albert Camus' Outsider, and many other absurd texts. And because of this existential philosophy, existentialism is also an important critical theory. It is a philosophical theory. At the same time, it is a critical theory where the characters in the postmodern text, they suffer from this existential problem, and because of this existential problem, it seems as if they are losing goals in life, losing hopes in life, and the text appears goalless. So this is something, and again there are some other points. Uh, Celebration of fragmentation. You see, fragmentation was seen in modern texts, But here actually postmodern postmodern authors, they celebrate this fragmentation. They also welcome it, um, saying that okay, if fragmentation cannot be um, repaired, so better to celebrate it in life. For example, see, um, in many texts, also in many movies, uh, so this concept of death, which was actually creating a kind of fear in human mind in the old literature, even in modern text. Here actually death is accepted, death is also celebrated, death is also welcomed. For example, that day I was also mentioning one of the characters, Mere Salt is a character in Albert Camus' Outsider, where he knows it very well that he is going to be executed tomorrow morning. But before that, the previous night, actually, what he said, he eats, he drinks, and also he creates merrymaking, um, enjoying his life to every bit, forgetting the fact that tomorrow he is going to be executed. Even in today's actually few years back, when Kosovo was executed, actually it has been reported that he never repented. Actually, though actually at the time of death, uh, um, everything was asked. Also, when police captured him, also he begged for his life. But actually, at the time of execution, it is reported that he did not have any fear. He did not have any. Even some of the rapists, which were who were executed some months or some years back in that Nirvaya case, actually they did not have any remorse. So this is a very peculiar tendency as far as in practice in our day-to-day life as far as postmodern man is concerned. Also in the text, we also find the same uh, mentality that in postmodern texts, the characters they don't hesitate to face death for certain ideology, and they justify that whatever way, um, whatever violence they have created, whatever sins they have created, whatever crimes they have created to justify their aims, their goals, their ideology. That is why today terrorists they take poison before they are caught by the police. They don't. They also they give slogan when they are caught by the police. Even in the jails, they don't suffer as if imprisonment is celebrated in their life. So this is a peculiar tendency as far as postmodern man is concerned and postmodern theory is concerned. Uh, then actually, in postmodern theory, uh, what post structuralism and postmodernism almost it appears very same. Where actually, as Derrida says, there is no center. Postmodern theorists also they believe in the same idea. There is no center. Okay, and periphery is more powerful than the center. That means the very concept of other, the very sense of otherness is actually, it appears as if the other, they are more powerful than the center. This is just the opposite, the antithesis of uh, the modernism or the old theory, right? Here, night appears as more important than the day. That is why in postmodern writings, in the postmodern poetry as well as in fiction, we find that this hopelessness, this goallessness, or whatever gloomy um, thoughts, or whatever the hopelessness or whatever this depression or nightmare that the postmodern man finds in life, actually it is celebrated, and there is no um, instead of rejecting it, instead of avoiding it, it is accepted, it is welcomed. That means suffering is celebrated. Suffering actually gives more meaning. Suffering gives more strength to the postmodern man as well as to the postmodern characters. So that is something as far as postmodernism is concerned. We'll discuss uh, uh, again uh, some of the important uh, points as far as uh, post-colonial theory is concerned. Post-colonial theory, it is there in your course, so better to discuss some of the post-colonial some of the points as far as post-colonial theory is concerned, and also I will discuss some of the post-colonial critics. So as far as post-colonial theory is concerned, actually it derives its idea uh, from the fact that how uh, colonialism and colonial writers, how they have imitated the West, and how this colonial thoughts that was presented in literature, in fiction, and how actually it created a kind of hybridity. Uh, Hybridity is a very important critical concept. It is uh, developed by Homi K. Bhabha. How hybridity culture is created because of this colonial writers. So instead of creating something new, how how the writers they followed the colonizers, their cultures, and instead of presenting the identity of a nation, um, how they have followed their culture, the colonizer culture, and how this colonizers ideology, how it was imposed on the colonized states. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is that how also some writers they try to create the identity of a nation. How there is a search for special identity, and how the post-colonial writers they answered back. They resisted the colonizers' point of view, the colonizers' ideology, and how the national ideology is reflected um, in the language of the colonizers, in their own language. How the post-colonial writers they are answering back. They are resisting. They are proving that even in spite of the fact that there was dominance, there was uh, um, there was an influence of colonial culture. At the same time, these post-colonial writers like Salman Rushdie and also some African writers like Nigu Thiango, so they try to use English language, particularly the Westerners language, the language of the West, um, how to create quality literature, how to go beyond, um, to create some kind of essential art, um, some kind of quality art, literature, fiction, poetry, and to show that post-colonial writers they are regaining their position. Uh, they are also creating their identity. They are creating remarkable positions, also getting awards. Even post-colonial writers, they have got Nobel Prize, Booker Award, and many others. As far as India is concerned, we have already achieved a Nobel Prize, also many times Booker Award. So that proves that post-colonial writers, um, they have not lagged behind. They are not only they are not following the West. At the same time, also they are as creative, even more creative than the Westerners. Their art is having a greater quality, greater impact, and writers, they also create a market. Their books are also demanded in the market, sold in the market. So it is a, they also create a special genre in the field of literature and art. So this is post-colonialism, uh, and we will discuss some of the post-colonial uh, critics. The first one is Edward said. Edward said regarding Edward said, it is especially he is mentioned in your MEG-5 book. Okay, the last chapter, what Edward said, what he said. His name is Edward said, and what he said actually it has been discussed in your course. He wrote a book Orientalism in 1978, and in this book he gave the concept. The concept is, he said that colonialism is directly, it is imperialism. Um, colonial colonial rulers, they um, came to India and also Africa and Australia and many other nations. Even America was also colonized, and wherever they went, actually they spread their empire in the name of development, in the name of growth, in the name of spreading education. They actually they imposed their own ideology and tried to finish the natives' culture, their literature, and here actually they exploited the people wherever they went. And the heart of the darkness actually it is also discussed in your book as a post-colonial text. Midnight Children is also a post-colonial text, and it is also discussed in your MEG-5 course. Uh, so how post-colonial writers they try to resist it, so that has been discussed. Here another important thing is white man's duty. They initially actually when Westerners came to India and also Africa, they actually they thought that okay, these people are savage, these people are black, they are the other subaltern. Subaltern study time permits. I will also discuss. They are the subaltern. Subaltern means they are not the main. They are subhuman beings. So these people uh, uh, they are like actually black people. They are inferior people. They don't have any ideology. They don't have any culture. They don't have any religion. So it is the white man's duty to educate them, to convert them into Christianity, their own religion, and to give them a culture. What culture? The white culture, the colonial culture. And they thought that, okay, this is the only culture in the world which is superior. And in this way, actually, they used their power, their science and technology and all that to impose their ideology. And in case there was a revolution, they tried to stop. They tried to stop it, to um, to defeat them, and indeed they were able to defeat the natives, and they ruled the colonies um, for so many centuries. As far as India is concerned, it is more than 250 years. They stayed here and they created a colonial culture, and as a result, we find when Macaulay, I think um, it was the late part of the 19th century when he gave his minutes on education. He said that okay, English education will be provided to Indians, and because of this English education and English culture, only clerks will be created and no officers. They will be carrying out the colonial order, the colonial culture, and they will be responsible um, to make their people uh, enslaved to this culture. So only clerks will be created and they would be imitating the West. So this was the concept, not only in India, also in other parts of the world. So um, the same thought, uh, the same kind of temperament actually it went on, and as a result, we find that this this Edward said while writing this book Orientalism. Actually, Orientalism means um, he took Asia, the whole Asia, India, Pakistan, China, and other third world countries. So he discussed that these third world countries, the poor nations, the the colonized nations, actually they lost their glory, they lost their culture, and they started imitating the culture of the West. And for that reason, it became easier on the part of the West to rule this country. And accordingly, their literature, their art, it was admired, not only admired, it was appreciated, and whoever tried to oppose it, they were imprisoned, they were punished. And for a long time, um, the post-colonial writers, the writers, the artists of these countries, they they were not encouraged to write books, produced art. So there was a kind of subjugation, and because of the subjugation, we find when actually these countries were they got their independence. As far as India is concerned, after 1947, we find the post-colonial writers. Also in Africa, we find post-colonial writers. In Australia, in America, also post-colonial writers. They did what? They they tried to create their identity. They tried to write text from not from the colonizer's point of view, from the Western point of view, from the point of view of the colonized people, the people who suffered in this process of colonization. So the literature produced by these writers after the independence of that colonized nations, actually it reflected the woes, the suffering, the the sad story of the colonized people, uh, and uh, uh, and they created a special kind of genre that is known as post-colonial literature. So then I see there is uh, another critic, Homi K. Bhabha, who is while discussing uh, in a book Nation and Culture, location. There is another book also, Location of Culture. Uh, the uh, science taken for wonders. So there are some books he has written where actually he has discussed a very important concept as far as post-colonial theory is concerned, is that hybridity. Actually, he said that as far as colonial period is concerned, imperialism is concerned, this West is concerned, actually they created a kind of hybrid culture. And actually, what is this hybridity? Hybridity means mixing of cultures. Because of this mixing of cultures, after the independence, the post-colonial writers, they find that the people uh, in these three nations, they became neither they behaved in a peculiar way. They could never become Westerners nor become the natives. So they showed a kind of hybridity in their mindset, in their behavior. They sometimes they behave like Westerners, sometimes also they behave like their natives. So as a result, we find a hybrid culture, and this hybrid mindset. Uh, actually it is reflected in the literature of so many post-colonial writers, and we find that there is a class, CLSH class um, um, between actually this Western ideology and Eastern ideology, this post-colonial ideology and the colonial ideology. Both they are coming face to face, and the fight that is going on between this East and West, and this is because of this hybrid nature of language and culture. So this is very important as far as post-colonial theory is concerned. because of this hybridity, we find a number of texts um, where the characters, most of the characters, they are we find helplessness in the characters. They are neither becoming fit to the native land nor becoming fit to the western land. They are neither the they are neither becoming the west-like people or the native-like people. So this is, and as a result, what happens? Mimicry is taking place. He also giving this another concept. Mimicry means imitation of the white man by the black. So the uh, the colonizers, they whatever ideology they imposed on the natives, actually the native they started imitating it, and as a result, what happens? We find uh, a very peculiar environment uh, in the post-colonial environment. How uh, how the characters, how the behavior of the people, it is reflected uh, in the post-colonial text. Then actually there is uh, another critic. She is an Indian. She went to the West, and she is now she is an international figure as far as uh, literary criticism is concerned. Uh, she is, she has created an identity. She is Gayatri Spivak. Actually, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. The Spivak name is actually taken because of her marriage to an European, Gayatri Spivak, Chakraborty Spivak. Actually, she gave the concept of the subaltern, and he wrote an important book. Um, Can this subaltern speak? And in this book, actually, she challenged, she she threw a challenge to the Westerners that whatever ideology you left on the natives, whatever um, dominance you created, or whatever cultural gap you created, or cultural emptiness you created in the natives, uh, and you thereby you created subaltern people, the others, and can they speak um, in this post-colonial concept, post-colonial era? Can they speak? That means, can we find the original mind, the original mindset, the native mindsets in our literature and culture, or in our art and literature? So, as we read the post-colonial text, actually, we are missing that. We cannot find the original, this original the original opinion, the original um, mindset of the native people, as if they have forgotten this native culture, this native language, and this native ideology or art, literature, whatever they had, whatever identity they have lost it. And particularly as far as um, Dalits are concerned, tribals are concerned, women are concerned, they are unable to speak. They are silent in the literature, and they cannot speak. And whoever coming forward as representative, particularly the intellectuals, the politicians, and whenever we find such characters in the post-colonial texts, they cannot truly represent the subaltern. That means um, speaking in favor of some people, or arguing in favor of some people, it cannot be original, because something is missed, right? So the literature produced in the post-colonial era, and whatever characters we find, they are not the original characters. They are as if they are the representative of the natives. And since, because of this colonization, because of this long period of subjugation, enslavement, we are missing the original speech, the original ideology of the subaltern people, and that is a loss forever. Of course, she has been challenged again, she has also been criticized, but this is the view she gives as far as post colonial era is concerned. Also, Gayatri Spivak actually she is translating this book, important book, Derrida's book of grammatology. I have already discussed in my last class of grammatology and structure, sign, and play in the discourse of human sciences, where actually he is Derrida is giving his theory of deconstruction, and this book of grammatology is translated into English by Gayatri Spivak. Uh, then, uh, then Edward Soja, there is another critic, post-colonial theorist. She gives the idea of third space theory. In the third world countries, actually, the third world countries, which are the third world countries, the poor countries, the countries who were colonized by the Europeans. These are the third world countries, and in these third world countries, third space actually space is created. Okay, um, first space actually he discusses in this book. First space is the response, urban response. The second space is imaginative response. It is a kind of representational space, and the third space is thinking and further thinking. Actually, here in the third phase, actually we find post-colonial writers. They are thinking for their own, even thinking further to answer back the colonizers to the Westerners. And nowadays, that is why in African literature, in Australian literature, of course, in Indian English literature, we find powerful writers. The writings of the third world countries are now becoming powerful, and accordingly, also many awards are going to in favor of them. There is another important critic, Benedict Anderson, actually, who gives the idea for imagined community. Actually, diaspora literature, which is also there, I could not discuss. Is of course not there in your syllabus. Uh, imagined community, the diasporic writers. They have multiple citizenship. They are when they go abroad, they stay there. But they cannot forget their native land, their people, their culture, their language. As a result, actually, these people they are known as imagined community, and they do what in a post-colonial era they spread their literature, their art. Of course, staying abroad, staying in a foreign land, actually, they cannot forget their own country, their own people, their own art, literature, and they do what they spread it. They also bring glory, even while staying outside of their land. So again, mm, so nationalism is not it's not a physical matter that you are staying in your state, in your country, and you have a nationalistic spirit uh, while uh, uh, while singing this Bande Mataram and all that, or Janagana Mana Adhinayak. Not that exactly. It can be imagined, it can be created. Even staying abroad, so scientists, doctors, or even artists, they can bring glory to a country or to a land. And that is why Rushdie, uh, very often we take pride for him because whatever he writes, whatever glory he has won, it is also the same glory for India. And he also coined a term, imagined homeland, like imagined community. Uh, the term given by Benedict Anderson. Rushdie also he gives this idea of imagined homeland in one of his essays, critical essays. He has mentioned it. Imagined homeland means he often he considers India as a imagined homeland, as if he's staying in India and he is finding the same problem which he has encountered in his own life in India, in his childhood, and of course youth. So this is something as far as uh, post-colonialism is concerned. And now I shall discuss something about new historicism. Of course, this new historicism is same. The term was first coined by American critic Stephen Greenbelt, Stephen Greenblatt. Um, Actually, he has uh, coined this term for the first time, and while giving this term, actually he says that uh, history and literature, they cannot be separated. That means at a particular time of history, it is responsible for the creation of a text, because history influences people, the author, and as a human being of a particular time, as a as an artist of a particular time of history, so he cannot avoid the influence of uh, that particular historical event. So history creates text, and in text, while interpreting the text, we cannot forget history. We cannot avoid history, and if history and text they would be cooperating each other, we can have we can interpret a text in a better manner. So that was his theory. It means parallel reading of literary and non-literary text. Usually, the same uh, at the same historical period. If the history uh, if the history has influenced the text, so we should also, if while interpreting the text, we should also interpret that particular point of time or point of history, how it influenced that text. For example, while interpreting God of small things, so God of small things, what idea is given? The idea is patriarchy. The idea is casteism. So we cannot avoid this issue. The problem that we find in the text behind the tragedy of Amu, uh, uh, behind the behind the not death, it was a murder of Velutha. What is responsible? His caste is responsible. So we cannot forget this caste problem, and if we cannot forget this caste problem, we have to go to the history of India's casteism. Okay, and accordingly what happened in the past, and which factors are responsible. Okay, how caste factors are responsible for the degradation of a country. So from that point of view, if you have a knowledge of history, how female were subjugated, how Dalits were subjugated, if we cannot consider it, this historical aspect, we cannot uh, interpret God of small things in a better way. Similarly, your untouchable cannot be discussed without referring to history. Midnight Children cannot be discussed uh, um, without referring it to the pre-independent and post-independent India, particularly this Hindu-Muslim relationship, this partition matter. So, so these are some of the points which were raised by the historian, particularly this Stephen Greenblatt. It refers to privilege the literary text. So in that way, literary texts were privileged because it has derived some of the ideas from the history. Uh, Literary and non-literary texts are given equal weight, and constantly they interrogate each other. Constantly they interrogate each other means actually they influence each other, they help each other. In the words of American critic Louis Montrose gave a statement. It is a combined interest. It is a combined interest in the textuality of history and the historicity of the text. This is a very important statement given by Louis Montrose as far as new historicism is concerned. He says it is a combined interest in the textuality of the history and historicity of the text. So in that way, if you apply this statement while reading a text, that means uh, a text is a history, and any history book is also a text. Though there are no characters, fictional characters, there are actual characters are there. For example, Ashok is a character, Muhammad Ghori is a character, So in this Mughal period, they are the characters, but they are also the text. So there is textuality of history and historicity of the text. So both they cooperate each other, and accordingly, if in that if we apply this theory, we can interpret a text in a proper way, in a better way. So that means history is a kind of co-text. Okay, and text is a co-history. So in this way, they both cooperate each other, and in this way, we find a better interpretation of a text. In this way, it is different from romantic subjectivity, where author's biography was given more importance. So we should not commit a mistake while uh, giving a historical dimension to the text and a textual dimension to history. We should not forget the fact that what in what way it is different from the romantic criticism. Romantic criticism actually they gave importance to the biography of the author's personality. It was just a kind of subjective criticism. Romantic criticism was a subjective criticism in the 19th century, in the late part of the 18th century and early part of the 19th century. Actually, what the mistake they committed, the mistake is that they only confined their criticism on what author's biography, what happened to the author. But here actually the history of the community, the history of the land, while giving a historical dimension to the text, actually what happens, the historicist, the new historicist, the critics of this theory, a school of thought, they say that the whole history of the land should be taken into account. The the historical moments which influence the author, that should be taken into account. Otherwise, we cannot interpret the text. Not that giving importance to the biography of the author. So in this context, let me tell you one thing. If you just imagine if Shakespeare is a if Shakespeare belongs to this 21st century or even 20th century, actually, could he be able to produce that kind of text like Hamlet, King Lear? No, he could not be able to create that kind of text, because the present context is something. There is a global context, there is terrorism, there is religious riots, religious hatred, there is casteism, there is women problem. So Shakespeare would not have said like this, "Frailty thy name is woman," as he says through Hamlet's mouth. He says, "Frailty thy name is woman," saying that women are inferior. So the point is, uh, Shakespeare says like this because he belongs to that point of history. He belongs to that remote past where patriarchy was powerful. Power was there in the hands of the male, not female. So because of that, such kind of text that he could produce. So this is something very interesting, that how history influences. Um, History means how this time factor is responsible, uh, making the author being influenced by this time, the historical moments, and accordingly we find that the trace of history in the texts. So its emphasis on history and culture both, uh, and accordingly cultural poetics, we find this cultural poetics that helps us to see text in a new manner. Cultural poetics is a very interesting idea. Um, Cultural materialism and cultural poetics. These are Western ideas given by Western critics, and by applying history, the sense of history, the sense of culture, uh, we are uh, we are at the advantage position to interpret a text um, in a better way. So this is something about new historicism. Now I will discuss something on Freud's theory. That is, all of you know Sigmund Freud and George Lucas and K. Jong. They are the 20th century psychologists, and how their psychological theory is helping uh, to interpret a text from that point of view. So I will be taking some minutes. I think already we have gone ahead of time. I will take few minutes to discuss some of the important points, and then we'll conclude. Psychology, psychology is the science of behavior, right? Psychology of means science of behavior, and as far as science of behavior is concerned, in literature, particularly in fiction, what we find? We find the characters, and what the characters do? The characters, while they when they interact with each other, their behavior is also taken into account. For example, Hamlet's behavior towards Ophelia. We cannot properly interpret Hamlet without using Freud's uh, psychology or Freud's psychoanalytical theory.